Good evening, and I'd like to welcome everybody back to another fabulous episode of The Night's Pub. I know it's been a while, and we are more than thrilled to have our very special guest, Paul Smith, coming back to The Night's Pub. Please stop by www.thenightspub.net and check us out here. We were on a little break, as indicated by the website, and but we're back, and we're glad to be back, and on the air. Brother Stan says hello. I actually spoke with him earlier, and we did a pod show, other than the live broadcast here, a little bit about 2-3 hours ago. So that'll be a treat for everyone. There will be not only this show with Paul going up, but also the one with myself and Brother Stan. So everyone, just wanted to say thank you for stopping by the Night's Pub. Again, we're kind of getting back into it after an extended break, mostly due to things, equipment replacement, office relocation, or actually studio relocation, and also just some things in life that just kind of got in the way. So Please stop by. If you're listening to this right now at this very moment, you are listening to us live, broadcasting out of our studio here in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and streaming on Shoutcast and also from our website. If you're listening to this other than December 2nd, then you are listening to a rebroadcast, which we can be found on many, many avenues to listen to there, one of which is iTunes, and iTunes and I just numerous ones, Podomatic, and so. But we just wanted to say thanks for joining us this evening. It's going to be an exciting show. We are more than thrilled to have Paul back on. But let's get a few things. Out of the way here. Last month, actually, I went up and visited Brother Stan. Actually, I digress. This is already December. Wow, how time flies when you're, just moving along. Usually after Halloween, that's when things really just scoot along, and before you know it, you're past Thanksgiving, and then boom, you're right into the Christmas holidays. So, but had a chance to go up there with Brother Stan and spent a couple days with him. Also, we did a 94 drive. Now, luckily, I was able to back up that file, the couple files of shows that we did, and also the video. And during this, downtime and everything else, other than being busy with work and school, I lost a computer and also the backup of that computer, so we thought that we had lost some of the shows that we did, but I was able to recover them, and I'm in the process of right now getting them up. So, guys, if you there's a few ways to become a guest on the Night's Pub. Just stop on by the Night's Pub to our show schedule, and there's going to be a PDF file that you can download. It's our Night's Pub guest, and open it up, read it. It lets you know, kind of informs you of what we're about. And who we're about. We've had many special guests here on the show, and we've had fun each time we've done it. And we look forward to having many of them come back, and which they usually do. And I believe the way that we do our show gives our guests the opportunity to talk, and so that we're not consistently have to take a break or with all the interruptions. So stop by, download that PDF file and take a look. Also, we're open to discuss anything you like. So if you want to drop us a line, please, don't hesitate to email me at elliot@thenightspub.net, stan@thenightspub.net, or just for general inquiry or questions or suggestions, info@thenightspub.net. Now, not only tonight will we have Mr. Paul Smith back on the airways with us, but we're also going to be trying to get some of our friends that we had to reschedule, like Mr. Thomas Dunn and his and the producer Jared Cressman for the film Detestable. Unfortunately, in October, right before we were ready to take our break, we were trying to set some things up to get them both on, and unfortunately the schedules just did not work out for both of us. So I will be reaching back out to them and having them on to talk about the hidden practices of human sacrifice, sexual abuse, and satanic ritual abuse. And it's going to be a pretty powerful show. So, but what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and reach out to Paul and get him on the air. And then in the meantime, just sit back, enjoy the music, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to the Knights Pub, www.thenightspub.net. Gearing up here to have our very special guest, Paul Smith, back on the air. Paul was born in Cape Girardeau, Southeast Hospital, raised in town, and educated by the Cape Public School System. I'm actually about a stone's throw away from where Paul grew up. Paul's mother was a longtime school teacher in nearby Scott County, where some feel the 1941 UFO crash occurred just outside of Cape City and county borders. Paul has been the featured guest on numerous radio shows, such as this one, and also Coast to Coast and Unexplained Phenomenon Radio. He's also done a few podcasts from England and one from France. Paul's our very special guest. Not only is he author of Mo 41, The Bombshell Before Roswell, 3 Presidents, 2 Accidents, more Mo 41 UFO crash data and surprises, but one of my favorite books is The Treasure Keys to Christ's Return. And but without further ado, I'd like to welcome back Paul Smith to the Knights Pub.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, and thanks for that extra plug for a book that I enjoyed writing, and I have 2 sequels all written up. Who knows if that'll ever get released, but I'm glad I have a fan here.
Well, Paul, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time out. I know last week Mother Nature kind of had a little bit differing opinion about having you come on, as we were kind of getting heavily inundated here with storms, winds, and power fluctuations. So, but everything worked out great tonight, and we're glad that you're on. And again, as I mentioned, the Treasure Keys to Christ's Return is one of my favorite books. I mean, I like all your books, but that one happens to be my favorite, and we're just thrilled that you come back on.
Well, I wanted to piece together some actual real-life prophecies in that book for that point to the return of Jesus Christ. It's a controversial subject, I'm sure, and I'm sure people have heard their pastor or televangelist talk about this, and they're probably to the point of, yeah, he's coming back. But I wanted to give different viewpoints, including the so-called paranormal world. A lot of people put some stock into Edgar Cayce, and he spoke repeatedly that Jesus Christ is coming back. And so did a popular series of best-selling books by Ruth Montgomery in the 1960s and 70s insist that it is coming in the decades to come. So I put together an adventure novel and tried to make it fun and exciting, and I'm glad you liked it.
Well, thank you. So, with the, you captivated us, and the reason that I find it so interesting is because I live right near the Cape Girardeau area, and you brought out The Bombshell Before Roswell, and that came out in March of 2016, if I'm not mistaken, and then you kind of gave us a little bit more information on the 3 presidents and the 2 accidents, which was a little bit more data for the Mo 41 UFO crash data and the surprises there. And one of my favorite books, as I mentioned before, is you kind of took a different spin with the Treasure Keys to Christ's Return, and now you return to us with Sexy Alien Races, which looking at the book cover and also reading about it is looks like it's a fascinating read. And how did you come about in writing this? I mean, what were you thinking when was it a series? Were you just wanting to be fun, serious, or was it something with like you're writing but with meaning, with like a message within the story?
Well, with my previous book, The Treasure Keys to Christ's Return, I wanted to combine fiction and nonfiction and create my own adventure novel, and I did that. And I always wanted to write a comedy novel. So I've had this idea of batting around in my feeble brain for about 15 years. I was on vacation around the year 2000, 2001 in Florida, and I picked up a USA Today newspaper, and in the sports section was an article I could barely believe. It was a story about people who go to the baseball parks in Major League Baseball, and they gamble on everything: hits, runs, errors, who's going to win, who's going to have the best ERA, etc. And they're also gambling on the mascot races during the 8th inning. Which costume mascot is going to run around the field and break the tape first? And to this end, people are running down to the wagon gate just beyond the outfield in the 8th inning when the runners, these mascots, gather to be released from the wagon gate and run around the field. Well, they're asking them, do you feel good today? You think you're going to win? And do you run well on a dry track? They're like racetrack touts. Can you believe this? And it's becoming a source of wagering. And I thought, wow, this is hilarious and yet rather sad because, gambling addiction is a growing problem, I'm sure, in America. But these people were treating the mascot races more important than the ball game itself. So I wanted to take that story and run with it and create a comedy novel, and I did. But I also wanted to combine it with some UFO stories that have been somewhat overlooked in the Nevada area around Las Vegas. And lo and behold, Las Vegas has an alien-themed minor league baseball team. So I created my own team and fictionalized it and had lots of wacky fun with the fictional characters. But I put in all nonfiction UFO stories, and about every other chapter has one. And so that you can be entertained while you read it, and you also will learn something. I didn't make anything up, although I changed a few names to protect the innocent. Some UFO fans out there, for example, may remember Bob Lazar. Well, that story came out with Mr. Lazar in the late 1980s and early 90s. Well, that was a long time ago for young people coming up in the world and wanting to know about UFOs. So that was one example of one I wanted to explain. That Bob Lazar was an American scientist who claims he worked on a crashed UFO at S4, part of Area 51 outside of Las Vegas, and every day he was allowed to back engineer it and study it and examine what made it go. And one day they let him read some briefing papers on how we got this craft and who it belonged to. And he was allowed to look at alien photographs of these typical grays that had crashed in their bodies and their autopsy report within this briefing document. And how somehow American forces managed to retrieve it without a big scandal, and it was taken to Area 51, and he was able to review this matter at his leisure. They let him alone and let him use his scientific resources to try to figure out how does this thing run. And at night, he began to hear about experimental craft, probably human recovered alien craft, being taken up into the sky at like 2 or 3 in the morning. And he camped out in the mountains around Area 51 and got some footage, and other people were taking footage, and this began to spread. And it even, I remember stories were on Inside Edition and maybe A Current Affair, news programs back in the early 90s that showed people camping out on these mountainsides, taking these amazing videos showing these white discs or lit objects flitting around in the sky, doing some amazing acrobatics. Supposedly these were human tests, human pilots trying out alien craft, so they would not receive much attention, but they did. And after a while, Bob Lazar was fired, and he felt in fear for his life for a while. And I wanted to get this data into my book, since Bob Lazar never sold out, never changed his story. He said he had numerous offers from Hollywood to turn it into a movie, but they all wanted to fictionalize it and make it a crazy, wild story. He said, I'm not going to do that. I don't want your money if you're going to turn this into something, bizarre or violent. And so to his credit, he never changed his tale, his accusation. And that's just one of the little stories within this comedy novel that I created. It's about partly about the alien costume people who run around the field on the baseball diamond. I'll get to that in just a second.
So, Paul, how come, and of course I'm just asking, when Bob Lazar, and I've read many of his articles and also, watched a few documentaries with him in there, and you had mentioned that, he had feared for his life. Now, with people like William Cooper, who was a Navy intel officer, and I know we're kind of sidetracking a little bit, but he had claimed that, when he was out in the ocean, that he had witnessed a UFO rise out of the ocean and of course shoot straight up into the sky, and he and his executive officer was pulled in and of course sworn to secrecy and everything else, and one thing led to another, and he was eventually killed. I mean, do you think maybe Bob, things like that have maybe, I don't know, it got close to that happening, or and I guess the reason, if he had that much access to that stuff, I mean, why isn't he dead, or was he in hiding so long that this stuff actually got out, and we're so used to it coming out with
I think that's a good description. Also, he just said what he had to say in a few interviews when it came out, and he said, I'm not going to make anything up. I'm not going to exaggerate. I've said all that I know, and it's out there. So to his credit, he's kind of laid low and minded his own business. I think he lives in Michigan now and has like a survivalist type company or something of that nature. But it's a good point that he kind of clamped up, maybe to save his own life also. But once his information was out there, there was no going back on it. The William Cooper story, I understand he went a little over the top and barricaded himself in his home, refusing to pay his taxes or something, and fired on government agents when they showed up. And so, yes, is that the correct story?
Right.
Yeah. So there's someone who passed away violently and suddenly, and he may have known a lot, but he may have died for simply going over the top and firing at armed government agents, which is never a wise idea.
Right. So what are some of the other stories that, of course, because we're so used to hearing about Roswell, and then until the, incident here in Cape Girardeau several years ago with them finding a crop circle in Chaffee, that's how the Mo 41 came up, your book that you had already written. So what other incidents of, extraterrestrial, landings or whatever that's happened here that we're not aware of?
My favorite one in doing my research is from April 18th, 1962, during the Kennedy administration. A UFO was seen, this bright, changing colored light, streaking over 10 American states, starting with New York, and then it headed westward, and finally they saw it in Utah. And this craft actually came down and landed near a small town called Eureka, Utah. And their power went out, at least to some of the town. So some of the people got together and formed little groups to go out in the community and find out what is going on. Why have we lost our power? And that's where they saw, apparently, some saw this strange disc or maybe cigar-shaped craft. It has different descriptions, I'll admit. And at one point, people got too close to it, and it suddenly lifted up and staggered along in the sky, occasionally make a little noise and with sparks flying out. And it headed in a different direction over Las Vegas, where this streak of light, this weird object in the sky, was photographed for a story in the Las Vegas newspaper the next day, the Las Vegas Sun. And then, supposedly, it crashed outside of Las Vegas, but it crash-landed on government land near Mesquite. And a search party with the local Clark County sheriff and his deputies started up, and they were told, you cannot come on this government land. That's the end of your search. Just forget about it. Go home. We'll handle it from here. So it was difficult for them to argue because it was belonging to the U.S. government or maybe the military. They have a huge amount of Nevada that is controlled by the government for weapons testing and aircraft testing and secrecy that they need to defend our great nation. So you would think that would be the end of the story. It appeared in newspapers the next day in April of '62, and then the story just seemed to vanish, and that's a little suspicious in itself. So I have a friend who's in showbiz, but when he was in college in Las Vegas, he decided to look into this story, and he got a hold of this Las Vegas Sun newspaper and decided to contact the still living reporter photographer who took this picture and wrote the story on this crazy UFO just before it crashed, seen over Las Vegas. The man was running a camera shop. So my buddy looked him up and went in there, and they talked amiably until he brought up the UFO crash. And the guy went berserk. He threw him out of his store and said, I don't know anything about this. Don't ever come back. My buddy said he went straight home, and when he did, he got a phone call from a dark, deep, mysterious male telling him, you don't want to go further on this story. He named him by name, named his parents, really shook him up, said this is how people end up dead. This is how people end up buried in the desert somewhere where you never find them.
Wow.
Yeah, this is the kind of threatening kind of stuff. They had my buddy's name. I guess he left it with the newspaper man who was running a camera shop, to be fair. And he said, you don't want to go forward with this for your school newspaper or for any other paper. And so my friend was scared shirtless, as I say, and he dropped the story right away, needless to say. It really rattled him, and that was probably the whole point of this phone call. They had his home phone number and knew his parents and knew him by name, and so that was the end of the story. And I wanted to get that the entire story from 62 and 15 years later in the 1980s within my book, Sexy Alien Races, and I contacted my buddy and made sure everything was in the right shape, the correct telling of his side of the story, and he approved it. And now he's currently reading the book, and he tells me that he might just option it to get it made into a motion picture.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that would be exciting. But I've been told lots and lots of books get optioned and very few actually get made into movies. Your percentage is still pretty small and the odds are still pretty great. But you can't go forward without getting that option, so that would be a first step. Haven't gotten there yet, but we'll see how that goes. I probably should explain the title a little bit more. The alien races are, it's a pun on the various alien races that are coming here and on the various alien races they hold at a Las Vegas ballpark every night with these costume mascots. So our fictional hero in the book creates 5 different aliens. He has to learn from his beautiful lady boss how to discern aliens and what different races are coming here. And he creates these costumes. They have to be realistic to run around the field. And that's where we get into various stories of sightings in the Nevada area or elsewhere, and that the alien costumes are so wacky that they decide to increase attendance at the ballpark by sort of sexing them up by creating male or female costumes that are very entertaining and wacky looking, and attendance does increase. It paid off to make them kind of sexy, but it raises a good question. Are there male and female aliens coming here? Are they clones or droids? Or do they have gender? Do they have a sexuality? It's worth asking yourselves, are they human-like? Or are they just totally non-human and reproduced in some manner? Or are they created in a factory for all we know? So I have all of that mixed into the story, which has a little bit of raciness now and then to try to appeal to younger people. I wrote a Christian novel. This is not a repeat of my Christian novel, but I don't use any profanity. I don't use any vulgarity, just a little naughtiness here and there to try to spice it up for the younger crowd who are quite used to sexy kind of references in modern culture. So that's why we have the title Sexy Alien Races, also to attract a book buyer's attention, quite frankly.
Now, you had mentioned, with the Las Vegas story, with your friend being called and, basically threatened his life and his parents threatened. Paul, why so much of the secrecy? And I know we touched on this before when we spoke about the UFO crash down here in Cape Girardeau and the times we've spoken about Roswell. Why so much secrecy, and why the reaction? I mean, that would be like myself going up to somebody, Cape County, and they're saying, "Oh, by the way, in 1941, there was a UFO crash," and getting the same response. I mean, what has happened to them people to cause them to react in such a manner?
We're all familiar with Coast to Coast AM, and I got to be on with George Knapp, who runs the Sunday night program from Las Vegas. He told me, and he told his readers, I think he put out a book or a website, that he's interviewed people who come out and bear witness against hoodlums, gangsters, maybe against even government misdoing and whistleblowers. And he's had people who come out and try to speak about their alien sightings. And most of these people are more afraid of the alien sightings repercussions from the government than anything from aliens coming back and doing anything to them. They're very frightened of the government because of stories of like Men in Black or witnesses turning up dead or threatened. And I can't explain it in any benign way other than the government wants this subject, or at least used to, wanted this subject closed, not discussed, not to be thought about, not to be aired in any serious manner. It may be a little different today in the last few decades. We're so saturated with alien talk show themes, alien magazines, books, alien-themed TV shows and movies that people are more conditioned and accepting of this, especially in the Western world, the Western Hemisphere. But I think people are more able to handle this now, and our government really should come forward and say, yes, we are being visited, but they still don't. President Trump is not connected with the world of State Department, the intelligence divisions, the military. I have a mild amount of hope that while he's in office, he might open up the floodgates and release paperwork or files or film footage of UFOs and be more forthcoming. But one host I was talking to on a radio talk show said he has heard Trump say he has no interest in that subject. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that does not sound encouraging, does it?
No, it doesn't.
So I don't know what to think, why the government would send people out to hush it up for so many decades, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even the 90s. But I think we're having a bit of a slow sea change, and things are turning around in the opposite direction. But getting openness in government from our government, our representative democracy, would be refreshing, wouldn't it?
It would. Now, since you've written about UFO crashes, the Mo 41, and then your new book here, has any of have you been approached or been warned or have had weird things happen to where because you are basically reiterating a lot of this information that maybe some people don't want back out into public? Has that ever crossed your mind while you were writing these books?
It has, and I've gotten questions to that effect, and the answer is no. No one's ever bothered me, threatened me, harassed me. I'm a total nobody, I guess. I'm not worthy of bothering or threatening my life, but I try to tell things honestly and fairly with balance, the idea that we are probably being visited, but I admit right up front, I've never seen a UFO. I've got no photograph or video footage to offer. I hear people come up to me and tell me their stories when they learn about the subject of my book, but I have no first-hand evidence whatsoever.
What would you think your experience would be if you, how would you react if, since you've written about this and, talked about it so much that you finally witnessed something to that nature?
I got a reaction from a Cape Girardeau radio host who interviewed me. She said, I would probably pee in my pants if I saw something. I'd be so afraid. And I laughed, but I kind of wonder if that would be my reaction too. We can talk all the suave, smooth dialogue back and forth, but if it actually happened right in front of you, wouldn't you be a little scared, if not terrified?
Yeah, I would probably be a little unnerved. That is the truth. I've had weird stuff happen, dealing with the supernatural, paranormal through my whole life, and walking around either seeing a ship or running into something or someone not from this existence or planet. That would probably unnerve me quite a bit.
Oh, I agree. I would like to think I'd keep my cool being a mature older adult now, but frankly I think I might be a little shaking and trembling in the knees for sure.
So, integrating all this, the true stories with, the story in sexy alien races, how was it difficult to do that, or did just one kind of help write the other? And when you blended them all together, how did the true stories help the story in your book?
I think you put that quite well. One helped or the other, or one aspect, fiction, led to an open space in my book. So I created the nonfiction section where you would read about alien stories, and then back to fiction, where the characters are trying to put a stop to one character's gambling on the races and making a small fortune on the side. When everything blows up in his face, he loses his job, he loses his girlfriend, he loses his best friend. He's on the skids, and he has to fight his way back. The typical boy meets girl, falls in love with girl, loses girl, and fights his way back to win her over. It is a romantic comedy, believe it or not, but the aspect of creating a fictional book and the Nevada-based UFO stories really blended together well. One kind of led to the other, or helped the other out, so to speak.
So what were some of the other stories, if you don't mind me asking, that
Sure.
that you know, people? I mean, to be honest, Las Vegas, I've never even heard of that one, and I pay attention pretty much to a lot of the UFO crashes, landings, or sightings. What are just some of the other oddities that you've ran into that you've elaborated on in your book?
All right, I will get to that, but I'll say real quick, I'll look up JFK's Daily Diary. It's a digitalized site where you can look at his actual secretary's log and schedule for his whereabouts and what he was doing and who he was seeing. So I thought I'll look up mid-April 1962 and find some telltale phone calls and meetings that I managed to find within the records of Franklin Roosevelt after the Cape Girardeau crash. Unfortunately, JFK was on vacation that week in West Palm Beach, Florida, and there were no records kept. Here it didn't go wrong, and President Kennedy could have gone anywhere, talked to anyone in person or on the phone, and it was not recorded. So that's bad news there. Now, in the Nevada story, I include, for instance, the plane crash right outside of Las Vegas in 1942 of Carol Lombard and 21 others who died in this TWA tragedy. They hit the side of a mountain on a crystal clear night when a UFO was sighted hovering over the mountain over a half hour in place before the airplane crashed. And once it hit the side of the mountain, having lost its power, strangely, the UFO vanished, according to witnesses. So I wanted to record that. I had that story in the back part of my second book, 3 Presidents, 2 Accidents. So I included more information on that summarized within this Nevada-based story, Sexy Alien Races. I also put in Robert O. Dean. Does that name sound familiar?
It does, actually.
Okay, I changed his name to Purvis J. Bean in the story. I think I heard somewhere where he's passed away, and someone else insisted, no, he's still alive. For those who are not familiar with this tale, he came forward, I think in the late 1980s also, and said that while he was in the military in Europe, he got a look at a secret, very top secret, classified government report that said the American government does have captured alien craft and dead bodies. He saw the autopsy photos and the descriptions of the weights and densities of organs of the aliens at the autopsy and where they crashed, and that various different types of aliens are coming here, and he named them. He said that it really shook him up reading this. This was back in the 1960s when almost no one was talking about these sorts of things. And once again, to his credit, Robert O. Dean has not embellished his story. He stuck with it. This is what happened to me type information. I think he lives out in the Southwest, so I had his character live in the Nevada area, and the 2 lead characters in my story go to visit him and get the lowdown on what he witnessed in this book. He would go to the bathroom and take this top secret report with him and write down little crib notes. He wasn't allowed to copy the report, but he wrote down every note he could scratch out real quick and hide it in his pants when he was in the military, and then put the top secret report back under lock and key in the middle of the night. He was working the graveyard shift. So it was an eerie, spooky report, and it talked about how some of the aliens are your typical grays. Some look a lot like human beings. Some are reptilian in their shape and their appearance, including yellow vertical eyeballs. Some of the reports were that aliens had been landing at some air bases. One of them was in Italy, and Robert O. Dean's description of this always makes me chuckle. He said, from what I read in this story, a UFO landed at an air base and a friendly alien stepped out, and a big, tough Italian sergeant wet his pants. He was so frightened, and he said that was a detail that stuck with me, and it sticks with me in retelling this story, that any one of us can talk tough, but we can really probably let loose a wide range of emotions if aliens really did set down, even if they're friendly ones. It would be a very traumatic and shocking event, which may be why they're not doing more of this. They're finding out human beings just tend to freak out a little bit, and maybe we're not as prepared as we think.
Very true, very true. So with the other stories that help with your book here, how much research had to go into that? I mean, obviously, if you're writing true stories, there had to be a lot of research to go into there. And how easy was it to get this information? I mean, since your friend with the Las Vegas incident, of course, I mean, that was from his experience, but right. you start digging into some of these things that people really don't want to talk about. How hard is that?
The Cape Girardeau UFO story took 4 or 5 years of research just to print the first book, and I had enough leftover material and news stories coming to me to create a second book. But I'm almost sapped dry on that one. But in the UFO cases around the Nevada, Las Vegas area, I must have spent about a year. And it was a stroke of good fortune that my buddy had his own take on this 1962 one that intrigues me greatly. I'd like to learn more about it. Kevin Randall is a UFO investigator and author, and he's written about this extensively. If you go online and use the old Google search engine, it's very helpful. You can't believe everything you read, though. There's some fringe element and extreme versions of stories and things that get distorted, and you have to use common sense and what sounds and what feels right, what seems believable. So I put this all together and put it together with the fictional storyline that I tried to make as fun and wacky as possible, and hopefully I can get a movie out of it. I've even created a television situation comedy treatment for my buddy in showbiz. It's just that I have to get in line behind a zillion other people who all have their projects and they have their hands out, and I'm like in the back of the line. I've been told my information, my stories, my treatments are all very interesting, and this could be real plausible material for a book or a TV show, but who knows? There's so many ahead of me, and there's only so many producers and so many outlets, cable channels, and motion picture companies that I have to just sit and wait. Sometimes you hear about a movie that took 10 years or more to create. So that's depressing. I could be dead by the time all of this comes around, but I'm giving it my best shot. We'll see what happens.
Well, I just, Paul, as always, it's such a treat to have you on to get your take on this subject, because, I mean, to be honest, when people look on like Bob Lazar, and of course when Bob Lazar's throw him in there, they always kind of reference William Cooper or even Phil Schneider. It's always good to get a different perspective, not leaning one way or the other on the subject like this. Because to be honest, I mean, until you started coming on to the show, we really did not, other than if it was just our own research, our own just kind of looking and documentary stuff like that, we really didn't have someone who had the outlook like you do. They come on the show. I mean, it's really refreshing. I mean, and it's kind of hard to explain. It's not one way or the other.
Well, I think I've got the best of both worlds. I spent my first 30 years in Cape Girardeau and the last 2 decades away from Cape Girardeau, but I visit about once a year. So I get a perspective on things from my own point of view, having lived in that area, and then from getting out into the world at least a little bit, and reading and talking to people. I was astonished, for example, a little old lady in her 90s across the hall from me where I live told me about this UFO that came down on her farm when she was a little girl. And her father said, "You can look from here, but we're not going to go near them. We're not going to bother these little space people or something like that. And she was just astounded to see this happen, and she never forgot it, and she's always wanted to tell someone about it. She was not from Cape Girardeau, honestly, I forget where she did see this, but it's just an example. You get some people talking, and they've had these stories bottled up for years, and they'd like to get it out, that they saw this, heard that, they read something that fits with them and something that they thought they saw. So it all comes together, and I'm very happy to pass it along to our Cape Girardeau audience, and I hope to have another book next year. I've got a couple planned I'm working on. One is on the Kennedy assassination, and another is on something that President Eisenhower did in the UFO field, if you know what I mean. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Well, Paul, we're coming up on our time. What are some projects, other than this book that you've currently released, and I know you explained a couple books that you're working on, but there are any future interviews, any guest appearances somewhere?
This show, actually, tonight, the book came out in October, so this is about the last one I have scheduled. I got a couple of others who say they would like to schedule me for a show, and they're having some problem with this or that. I'm thinking, yeah, you'll get around to it, but I'm always available if someone wants to discuss these matters respectfully. Anyone who wants to know more can certainly go to my Facebook page called Cape Girardeau's 1941 UFO Crash, America's First. I get stories and information on the Cape matter from there once in a while, little dribs and drabs, or people who say they're very fascinated by this. You can go to argusbooks.com and look at my authors page and order books from there. Argus has free shipping, which is really handy compared to like Amazon.com and other ebooks that you can, or online sites that you can go to. I'd like to get my books more out in stores. It becomes more of a complicated issue, but you can order them online. And I thank you for having me on the show tonight to promote that.
Paul, we greatly appreciate having you on. We will definitely be in touch, and we are looking forward to those other books that you're writing, especially on the JFK assassination. That is one area where I absorb the information. That's just always fascinated me.
It is a fascinating swamp, and I'm putting together something people may never have heard of or considered before. I'd like to give you more detail, but I'll just leave it at that. And I'm stalling just a little bit to make sure I get my facts right. But, in April, they're supposed to release more long-concealed government documents. So we'll see what happens there, what comes out, and if it fits in with my storyline. And I hope to get that book out about a year from now, November of next year, the anniversary date of that tragic event.
Well, Paul, please keep us informed and let us know. And as always, you are always welcomed on to the Night's Pub as our guest.
All righty, thank you.
All right, have a good evening.
Mm-hmm.
Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Paul Smith, author of Sexy Alien Races. Please stop by our website, and you can check him out. We have links to his website and also to Amazon. Paul is one of our favorite guests and authors, and we love having him on. And as I mentioned to him during the show, it is such a breath of it's refreshing to have somebody on that doesn't lean one way or the other on the subject of UFOs, and we've always looked forward to having Paul on, and we're glad that we finally got him on. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, we had some difficulties when he was originally scheduled, so we're glad he came on. And Paul, if you're listening to this, we just wanted to say thank you, sir, for coming on. We look forward to always having you on. Please stay in touch and keep in touch, and we're looking forward to speaking with you once again. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before we get out of here, I wanted to thank all of our, once again our guest, Paul Smith, for coming on. Also, all of our listeners in the chat room. Also, all of our listeners that are in the our servers here, our broadcast servers. We just want to say thank you, and also, thank you to Brother Stan for kind of doing the show with me earlier, getting us all warmed up and equipment checked out, and we just want to say thanks. And guys, please stop by www.thenightspub.net and download the shows. Watch the movies, and do me a favor, and do us a favor, actually. Guests such as Paul Smith, we don't pay them, and they don't pay us to come on. We don't get anything free from them, and we're not asking that. But what we do get is their time, and their time is very important because, let's take it. Let's just face it. Time is something a lot of us just don't have enough of. So with that being said, stop by their website. Check out their books. Buy their books. They're not very expensive. Buy their books and see the people that you listen to here on air with us. See how they write. See what, go to their Facebook pages and just, get a better relationship with our guest, and that'll help bring in the audience too. So when we do have them back on, you're very familiar with their content and with their, with their subject matter. So, well, my friends, I just wanted to say thank you. I want to say thank you for joining us this evening. And I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to come onto your, radio waves. So in the meantime, until we meet again, take care of one another, love one another, look out for one another, and keep on praying, and don't stop praying. And we'll see you the next time down at the pub.